Hi, I'm Joseph Liederbach, and this is my technical demonstration for Aviation 323. And today I'm going to be talking about and showing a little bit about air gaps when it comes to networks, what are they, and specifically how they've been broken into and how they're currently being broken into. Little overview, what I'm going to talk about today. First off, what is an air gap? What is it exactly when it comes to computer networks? Some of the limitations of an air gap system, pluses and minuses. Times an air gap has been exploited in one specific time that it was exploited very well. A few modern ways that are being developed to break air gaps, specifically with alternative means that haven't been really used in the past. And also I'll talk about some additional security that is involved with air gaps more than just the air gap itself. So what is an air gap? Air gap is the physical separation of two computer networks. This would be any metal wiring, any wireless communications, anything and all that could link these two networks together at all with communications. And this could be a whole network of computers or even just a single computer that's unplugged from your router and not connected to the internet. There is absolutely no electronic access to an air gap network. It can't have any to be a true air gap. And all communication with an air gap network is generally physical, whether it's a thumb drive or a CD or a person at a console typing in data into the system. It all has to be not over any kind of network connection. Two examples of air gap networks where you might see them today. The military would be a prime example. Much of their secret information is stored on air gap networks. These networks are completely separate from non-secret networks and require some different form of access to get on and would be labeled very well as to what kind of network they are. No transfer would be allowed between a secret network and a non-secret network. This maintains security so that files can't be taken off of a network or malicious programs loaded onto a safe network. And much of what would be stored on these would be secret information and anything that could cause harm or any kind of backup kind of situation with the military. Another form of air gap network would be any kind of infrastructure that's on a network. This could be any kind of high-risk information, medical information, power grid information. If somebody was able to get onto a network that controlled, say, a power plant, for instance, they might be able to harm that, cause a loss of power, and as a byproduct of that, people could lose power in their homes, hospitals could lose power, anything that power is critical could fail, including medical equipment, and it could even lead to people dying. Medical networks are especially open to this kind of attack because of how sensitive a lot of the equipment is. Just small bits changed in code or something could cause huge effects on medical equipment. Some of the limitations of an air gap is that you can't connect to it, which is also the positive, but it makes updating and communicating and getting information on and off in a secure way very hard. It requires people to do it, so even though there might be no network communication, if somebody's going to go and load data with a thumb drive or some other form of physical media, there's still a transfer of data. So an air gap network isn't completely closed off from everything else, because the network still needs to be used. So the air gap is limited in that way that it's hard to access, even for the people who can access it. Times air gaps have been exploited. One great example of this is the Stuxnet virus. So the Stuxnet virus was discovered in the mid-2010s, and what happened is a group, probably a government group with Israel and or the United States, created a program that would actually affect the Iranian nuclear refineries. Even though these networks were completely on air gaps, they were still able to get their malicious software into the systems and actually cause quite a bit of damage to the hardware that were operated on these networks. So what it was a computer virus with code, and it entered the network loaded on hardware that was sent in from suppliers for Iran's nuclear program. And this is really interesting because while the network itself that the refinery was on was air-gapped, it was a lot easier to get onto the, like, actually physically in the area of where the hardware was being produced for these facilities. So they actually loaded it onto the a lot of the computers and stuff that were being updated into this nuclear refinery. And when those came into the actual nuclear refinery, they were able to transfer their malicious software and look for the pieces of hardware they were going to affect. And it actually went after the controllers for the motors on the refiners. So that was really a big way that people were able to infiltrate an air-gapped network, and it almost didn't matter that the network was air-gapped. One byproduct of this, however, was that the virus spread everywhere, because it just looked for any open spot it could once it got on the network. Even if it wasn't on the specific network, it would still look for anything that it could get onto. So it ended up infecting a lot of other computers totally harmlessly because it didn't find the correct hardware to attack. But that's how it was discovered in the end, is that people saw it on computers that it shouldn't have been on, even though it wasn't having any real effect on them. So some modern methods of breaking air gaps, or different methods than what the people used for Stuxnet, one is called AirHopper, and it actually takes the components inside of the computer that it's infected with and uses them in ways that they totally were not intended for. All the computer components are designed to have a purpose, whether it's a graphics card or a motherboard or CPU, but AirHopper has actually been demonstrated to kind of hijack the hardware and actually use them as transmitters on, specifically in the FM band, but I'm sure people have used it for other frequencies as well, to actually transmit from that computer to another hacked phone that's waiting to receive, to get information from a closed network. So if you're able to get a virus onto a computer in a closed network, you can then use that computer to transmit data to another device that is waiting for it in ways that it was never intended to. So it's a really good way to get information off of an air-gapped network. Some other methods that people have used is light and heat. So say like an iPhone has a flashlight on it. If you were able to get some software on there that would flash the light in some sort of system to transmit information off of the iPhone, if it was like air-gapped or something, or maybe not an iPhone and actually a network that had important information on it, you could use that, and then if you're looking at the right time or had another camera looking, you could see that light getting transferred off the air-gapped network. Some additional security that is needed in addition to the air-gapped network is, talked about a little before, humans still have to make input to the network. So the human factor of security is another big thing. You really need a way to manage what people are involved with the network so that they can't steal or put on bad software or steal important things. And then the hardware itself, as in the AirHopper example, the hardware was used for something that it was never intended to, but somebody figured out how to do that. So you need to know the hardware you're putting in and some of its shortfalls so that you can protect against that, as well as knowing what's coming on the hardware, like in the Stuxnet example. You don't want to be able to have tons of software being able to come in on hardware. You want to be able to check that. And then how does an air gap work personally for you? This is where I'm going to get into a little demonstration. It's really good to protect your personal computer and stuff and keep it separate from places that could hurt you, such as public Wi-Fi and things like that. And one really good example is actually using thumb drives to attack another computer. And so this is just a really simple method of doing it. I've got a normal thumb drive here that it's legit just a normal thumb drive that I stole from my roommate. And all it is a file that's loaded on there that says it's just a file, or it looks like a folder with more files in it. I named this all the test answers because somebody's probably going to click on that if they're in a situation like me in college or something. And so if you just leave this thumb drive around or give it to somebody and say there's something on it they need in this folder, is all they need to do is open it up and click on it. And if you'll notice, it looks like it's a folder. I changed the icon and it looks totally legit, but as soon as you click on it, it just opens up a million folders and calculators and everything. And this is a super simple example and not actually bad at all, as all you have to do is restart the computer and it stops opening programs. But in a situation where you had important information on your computer, or financial documents, or you worked with a company computer, somebody might be able to put information on a thumb drive that, even though you weren't on a public network and they couldn't get into your computer wirelessly, if they got you to plug in their thumb drive to print something for them, or to see if, to open up a file for them so they could see it, they might have malicious software on that computer that could harm your computer or steal information. So all that this little program does on this thumb drive is open up a bunch of calculators and finders and Google Chrome windows as fast as the computer can. It just loops the opening command. So in this situation, it's not dangerous at all. All you have to do is shut down the computer, open it back up, and just don't run the program again. But something like this that is on either some sort of device that is normal for an unsecured network, or for an air-gapped network, like you would have in your maybe your UAS system if it runs on a network, you have to be really careful what you're plugging in and what you're opening. That's why in a lot of, especially air-gapped networks, thumb drives are a no-go, because you don't know where it came from necessarily or what's on it. There could be a program like this, except much more dangerous, and it might be able to shut down your whole network, which in the UAS case would make things very kind of sketchy. If you're flying and your network goes down, what does that mean for the mission? And does that even mean your airplane might crash or something like that? So it's really important to maintain security when you have an air-gapped system. Don't be plugging thumb drives in, especially from places you don't know. Don't be opening files, but keep it as secure as possible. And any changes that are made or any hardware upgrades all need to be checked and logged, and you need to be really careful with how you use your network that's been air-gapped so that you don't introduce bad malicious software or hardware into the system. Thank you for watching my presentation, and it was on air-gapped systems, Aviation 323 technical demonstration.